In a quiet corner of the Georgia hills where oak trees draped in Spanish moss leaned over winding driveways, and the air always carried the faint scent of magnolia, stood a house that looked more like a museum than a home. Marble floors stretched from room to room, reflecting the light from crystal chandeliers that never dimmed. Every surface gleamed, polished, perfect, untouched by the messiness of real life. But behind those tall windows in a sunlit room on the second floor lived a boy who had never taken a single step. His name was Leo. He was 10 years old, with eyes too old for his face and a voice that rarely rose above a whisper. He'd been born with a condition doctors described in careful, complicated terms, something about nerves not talking properly to muscles. But all Leo knew was that his legs wouldn't listen. No matter how hard he tried, they stayed still, limp, like they belonged to someone else. He'd spent his childhood in custom wheelchairs that cost more than most cars, surrounded by therapists who came and went with clipboards and hopeful smiles. There were machines that buzzed and pulsed, robotic suits that clicked and whirred, even a room filled with mirrors and lights designed to rewire the brain. Nothing worked. Not really. His father, Darius, was the kind of man people described as self-made. He'd built a logistics empire from nothing, a string of warehouses, fleets of trucks, contracts with half the Fortune 500, and he treated life like a problem to be solved. When Leo was diagnosed, Darius didn't cry. He called his assistant and said, "Find me the best. No budget limit." Within weeks, specialists flew in from Boston, Zurich, Tokyo. They ran tests, took scans, offered theories. Darius listened, nodded, wrote checks. But as the years passed and Leo remained seated, something in Darius hardened. Not out of anger, at least not at Leo, but out of helplessness. And helplessness was a feeling he wasn't used to, so he filled the silence with efficiency. Staff rotated through the house like actors in a play, nannies, nurses, housekeepers, each one trained to be polite, precise, and invisible. They spoke in hushed tones, moved without sound, and never stayed long. Leo noticed. He'd watched them from his chair, wondering if they saw him as a person or just another item on a very expensive to-do list. Sometimes, when he was feeling brave, he'd ask a question. "Do you have kids?" Or "What's your favorite food?" But the answers were always short, rehearsed, careful. They smiled, but their eyes stayed distant. The house itself felt like a beautiful cage. Leo could roll through rooms filled with art worth millions, past pianos no one played, past shelves of books no one read. He had everything except someone who stayed. Someone who didn't treat him like a project. He loved comic books, especially ones about heroes who could fly or turn invisible. In those pages, his body didn't matter. But when he closed the book, the wheelchair was still there, waiting. Darius tried in his own way. He'd come home late, still in his suit, and sit beside Leo's bed for exactly 15 minutes. They'd talk about school. Leo was tutored at home, or the weather, or the new telescope Darius had ordered for the observatory room. But the conversations never went deep. Neither of them knew how to say the things that really mattered. "I'm scared. I miss you. I wish I could fix this." One afternoon, Leo overheard 2 staff members whispering in the hallway. "Poor kid," one said. "All this money and he can't even walk." The other replied, "At least he'll never have to worry about bills." Leo rolled back into his room and closed the door. He didn't cry. He just felt tired. Tired of being the poor kid. Tired of being the reason his father's shoulders slumped when he thought no one was looking. Then, one Monday morning, a new woman arrived. She didn't come in through the front door like the others. She used the side entrance, the one near the kitchen, carrying a small duffel bag and a thermos wrapped in a faded cloth. She was in her late 40s, with silver threading through her braids and hands that looked like they'd done real work. Her name was Imani, and she'd been hired as the new housekeeper after the last one retired. Darius had found her through a recommendation from a pastor at a local church, not through an agency, not through a resume. Just a name passed quietly from one person to another. Imani didn't wear a uniform. She wore a soft cotton dress and sensible shoes. When she met Leo for the first time, she didn't crouch down to his level like the therapist did. She just stood, smiled, and said, "Hey there, I'm Imani. You must be the guy who leaves comic books in the hallway." Leo blinked. No one had ever noticed that before. He left them there hoping someone might pick one up, start a conversation. But no one ever did. "Yeah," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Well," she said, "next time, Leave me Iron Man. I like the ones where he builds stuff from scrap. That was it. No pity, no medical questions. Just a shared interest in superheroes. Over the next few days, Leo started paying attention to her routines. She hummed while she wiped counters, old songs he didn't recognize but that made the kitchen feel warmer. She didn't flinch when he rolled in unannounced. In fact, she'd often set out a plate of sliced apples or a mug of warm milk, just in case you wandered by. She talked to him like he was a regular kid, asking about his drawings, teasing him about leaving socks everywhere, even letting him help stir pancake batter on Sunday mornings, though he mostly just watched, his hands resting on the bowl. Most importantly, she didn't treat his chair like a barrier. She'd push it without being asked if they were going somewhere, but she never assumed he needed help unless he said so, and when he was quiet, which was often, she didn't rush to fill the silence. She'd just keep working, humming, letting him exist without performance. For the first time in years, Leo didn't feel like a problem to be solved. He just felt. Seeing Darius noticed the change too. He saw how Leo lingered near the kitchen longer than usual, how his shoulders relaxed when Imani was around. He didn't say anything, he wasn't good with words, but he stopped scheduling back-to-back meetings on Sundays. Instead, he'd sit at the breakfast nook sipping coffee, watching the two of them bicker playfully over whether Batman or Spider-Man was better. The house still gleamed. The chandeliers still sparkled. But something inside it had begun to shift, slowly, quietly, like the first green shoot pushing through winter soil. And no one, not even Darius with all his money and plans, could have predicted what would happen next. Because sometimes, the most unbelievable things begin not with a miracle, but with a woman who shows up with a thermos of ginger tea and the simple courage to treat a boy like a person. Imani didn't come with promises. She didn't arrive with a plan to fix anyone or change the course of a life. She came because rent was due, her daughter needed new glasses, and the church bulletin had listed a live-in position for someone trustworthy and kind. That was all. No grand intentions, no hidden agenda, just a woman doing what she'd always done, showing up, working hard, and treating people like they mattered. She moved into the small room off the kitchen, the one previous staff had treated like a temporary stop on their way to something better, but Imani unpacked her things slowly, hung family photos on the wall, a son in a graduation cap, a daughter holding a science fair trophy, her late husband smiling in a faded Polaroid from a beach trip 20 years ago. She brought her own spices, her own coffee beans, even a small potted basil plant she set on the windowsill. Little by little, she made the space hers. And in doing so, she made the whole house feel less like a showroom and more like a place where real life could happen. Leo noticed right away. It wasn't just that she spoke to him like he was normal, it was that she expected things from him too. "You gonna leave that plate on the table all day?" she'd ask, eyebrows raised when he forgot to bring his breakfast dish to the sink. Or, "If you're gonna draw on that notepad, at least share the good markers." It was the first time in years someone had held him accountable for small, ordinary things, and it felt like a gift. Because being treated like he could do things, even tiny ones, made him feel less like a patient and more like a kid. She didn't hover. That was the real difference. The therapists, the nannies, even his father, they all watched him like he might break. But Imani moved through the house with a calm rhythm, trusting him to be part of it without needing to be managed. If he wanted to sit in the sunroom and read, fine. If he wanted to follow her while she folded laundry, that was fine too. She never made him feel like a burden or a spectacle, and when he asked questions, real ones, not just polite small talk, she answered honestly. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" he asked one afternoon as she stirred a pot of red beans on the stove. She didn't flinch, just kept stirring. "Sometimes," she said. "But loneliness ain't about how many people are around. It's about whether anyone really sees you." She glanced at him. "You know what I mean?" He did. More than she probably realized. Evenings became their quiet time. After dinner, while Darius disappeared into his study for calls that never seemed to end, Leo would wheel himself to the kitchen table. Imani would pour 2 mugs of chamomile tea, hers with honey, his with a splash of milk, and they'd sit in comfortable silence or talk about nothing important. The weird cloud shapes that day, a squirrel that kept stealing birdseed, the plot twist in the comic he was reading. She never pushed, never prodded. She just let him be. And slowly, Leo started opening up, not in big dramatic confessions, but in small, honest moments. He told her about the dream he kept having, where he was running through a field, wind in his hair, legs strong and sure. He admitted he hated the way people looked at him in public, like he was fragile or tragic or both. He even confessed he sometimes pretended his chair was a spaceship, just so he wouldn't feel stuck. Imani listened, really listened. Not with pity, but with understanding. Dreams like that, she said once. They're not just dreams. They're your body remembering what it's meant to do. Don't you ever feel bad for wanting that? One Saturday, she brought in an old record player she'd found at a thrift store. My mama used to play this every Sunday morning, she said, placing a vinyl on the turntable. Soft piano notes filled the room. Warm, slow, full of feeling. Without thinking, Leo started tapping his fingers on the armrest to the beat. Imani smiled. There you go. You got rhythm in you. From then on, music became part of their routine. Gospel on Sundays, jazz on rainy afternoons, old Motown when she was feeling nostalgic. She'd sway a little while washing dishes, and sometimes, if Leo was feeling brave, he'd hum along. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't a treatment. It was just joy, simple, unguarded, human joy. Darius began noticing the changes too. Not in dramatic ways, but in glances. He'd walk past the kitchen and see Leo laughing at something Imani said, head thrown back, eyes bright. He'd hear music drifting from the sunroom where his son used to sit in silence for hours. Once he even found Leo trying to draw Imani's hands, 'cause they look like they've lived, the boy had mumbled when caught. For the first time in years, Darius felt something other than dread when he thought about his son's future. Not hope exactly, that still felt too fragile, but something close to it. A quiet stirring, like the first hint of dawn after a long night. He started joining them for tea sometimes. At first he sat stiffly, unsure of what to say. But Imani never made him feel awkward. She'd hand him a mug, ask about his day, and keep folding laundry like it was the most natural thing in the world. Slowly he began to relax. He learned that Imani's son was studying engineering, that her husband had passed 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, that she believed in second chances but not in wasting time on people who wouldn't meet you halfway. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, Darius asked, "How do you stay so steady?" Imani didn't answer right away. She looked out at the storm, then at Leo, who was flipping through a comic with a contented sigh. "Life knocks you down enough times," she said softly. "You learn that standing back up ain't about strength. It's about who's willing to stand with you." Darius didn't reply, but something in his chest loosened. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. The magnolia blossoms fell, and the air grew thick with summer heat. Leo started asking for Imani by name when he needed help, not because he couldn't manage, but because he wanted to be near her. He'd wait by the kitchen door in the mornings just to hear her greet him. He'd leave little drawings on her pillow, a sun, a teacup, a pair of hands holding a heart. And Imani? She never made a fuss. She just kept showing up, with soup when he had a cold, with extra pancakes when he'd had a rough therapy session, with stories about her childhood in Savannah that made him forget, for a little while, about his own limitations. No one expected what would happen next. Not really, but looking back, maybe it was inevitable. Because when someone finally sees you, not your diagnosis, not your chair, not your father's fortune, but you, something inside you starts to believe you're worth standing for. And sometimes that's all it takes. Rain had been falling since dawn, steady, heavy, the kind that turns driveways into rivers and makes the whole world feel hushed. Inside the house, the usual hum of electronics had gone quiet. A transformer down the road had blown in the storm, and now the lights flickered, the Wi-Fi blinked out, and the smart systems that kept everything running smoothly fell silent. For the first time in years, the house felt ordinary, vulnerable even. Leo was in the sunroom halfway through a graphic novel when his wheelchair gave a soft beep and stopped. The battery backup hadn't kicked in. Too much moisture in the air, maybe, or just bad luck. He pushed the joystick, nothing. He tried again, harder. Still nothing. Frustration bubbled up fast, hot and sharp. He slammed his palms against the armrests, his breath coming quick. It wasn't just the chair. It was the helplessness, the way his body never cooperated when he needed it most. The way everything in his life depended on machines, on people, on things that could fail without warning. From the hallway, Imani heard the thud. She'd been mopping the tile near the dining room, her sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. She didn't rush in like an alarm had gone off. She just walked in calmly like she'd been expecting this moment all along. "You stuck?" she asked, leaning on the mop handle. Leo didn't look at her. "It won't move," he muttered, voice tight. She nodded. "Power's out. Whole neighborhood's dark." She set the mop aside and stepped closer. "You want to stand?" The question came so casually, like she was asking if he wanted more juice or a different blanket. Leo finally looked up, surprised. "I can't," he said flatly. "You can try," she said. "Just for a second. I got you." There was no pressure in her voice, no expectation. Just an offer, simple, steady, real. And something about the way she said it, like standing wasn't some impossible miracle, but just another thing a person might do on a rainy Tuesday, made him hesitate, made him consider it. He swallowed. Nodded once. Imani moved without hesitation. She stepped in front of him, bent her knees slightly, and slid one arm under his shoulders, the other behind his knees. She didn't treat him like glass. She lifted him like he was someone she'd carried before, like he belonged in her arms. And then slowly she helped him to his feet. His legs hit the cool tile. They buckled instantly, trembling like leaves in a windstorm. He gasped, bracing himself for the fall, but Imani held firm. Her grip was strong, sure, but not tight. She didn't force him upright. She just gave him space to find his balance, if only for a breath. And then she started to sway. Gently, rhythmically, like she was dancing with someone only she could see. A soft hum rose from her throat, familiar, wordless, warm. It was the same lullaby she sometimes sang while washing dishes, the one that sounded like home and safety and 1,000 quiet nights. Leo's hands flew to her apron, fingers clutching the fabric like it was the only thing keeping him from floating away. His knees still shook, his muscles burned, but he wasn't falling. He was standing, not perfectly, not for long, but standing, longer than he ever had before, longer than any machine or therapist had ever coaxed him to. From the doorway, Darius stood frozen. He'd come looking for Leo when the lights went out, worried about the backup systems failing. He hadn't expected this. He watched as his son, his quiet, cautious boy, stood on his own 2 feet, supported not by wires or algorithms, but by a woman who'd shown up with nothing but kindness and a thermos of tea. Tears welled in Darius's eyes, spilling over before he could stop them. He didn't wipe them away. He just stood there, watching the impossible happen in the most ordinary way. Inside, Leo wasn't thinking about miracles. He wasn't thinking about his condition or his limitations or the years of failed treatments. He was thinking about the warmth of Imani's arms, the steadiness of her breath, the way her humming seemed to wrap around him like a blanket. For the first time, his legs didn't feel like strangers. They felt like his, shaky, uncertain, but his. After nearly a full minute, maybe more, his strength gave out. His knees folded, and Imani lowered him gently back into his chair, like she'd done it 100 times before. She didn't say "good job" or "look what you did." She just smoothed his shirt, gave his shoulder a light squeeze, and said, "Next time we'll try with music." Leo looked up at her, eyes wide. "Next time?" "Sure," she said, picking up her mop again like nothing extraordinary had happened. "You think I'm gonna let you skip out on standing practice just because the lights went out?" He laughed then, really laughed, and the sound filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Later that evening, after the power came back on and the house hummed back to life, Darius found Imani in the kitchen drying dishes. He didn't thank her. He knew words wouldn't be enough. Instead, he leaned against the counter and said, "He's never stood that long." Not once, Imani didn't turn around. "He's been ready," she said simply. He just needed someone to believe it with him. Darius nodded. He finally understood. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the latest medical breakthrough. It was about trust. About someone looking at Leo not as a problem to solve, but as a person worth believing in. That night, Leo didn't reach for a comic book. He sat by his window watching the rain slow to a drizzle, replaying the feeling of his feet on the floor, the hum in Imani's voice, the way his heart had pounded, not from fear, but from something closer to hope. And in the quiet of the storm-washed night, something inside him shifted. Not because he could walk now, he couldn't, not really, but because he finally believed he might one day. Not because of machines or money, but because someone had shown him what it felt like to be held, not fixed. The next morning, when Imani came in with his breakfast, he was already waiting by the kitchen door. "You ready?" she asked, setting down the tray. He looked up at her, eyes clear, voice steady. "Yeah, let's try again." And just like that, the unbelievable became part of their everyday. What happened in the sunroom didn't fix everything. Leo still couldn't walk across the room on his own. His legs still tired quickly, and some mornings getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. But something had changed, something deeper than muscle or nerve. He now believed in a quiet, unshakable way that his body wasn't broken. It was just waiting. And that made all the difference. Imani didn't treat the moment like a breakthrough to be celebrated with fanfare. She simply folded it into their routine, like adding a new spice to a familiar recipe. Every afternoon after lunch, she'd come find him. "Time to stand," she'd say, as casually as if she were asking if he wanted a snack. And Leo, without hesitation, would roll to the sunroom or the kitchen or wherever she was working that day. Their sessions weren't clinical. There were no timers, no charts, no stiff instructions. Sometimes they'd stand while counting the tiles on the ceiling. Other times, Imani would recite lines from old poems she'd memorized as a girl. "Hope is the thing with feathers," she'd say, voice low and steady, as Leo wobbled on unsteady legs. Once they even tried balancing while she described the taste of her grandmother's peach cobbler, so vividly that Leo swore he could smell cinnamon and brown sugar in the air. He fell often. More than once, he landed hard on the padded rug they'd started keeping in the sunroom, but Imani never panicked. She'd just help him up, dust him off, and say, "Try again. You're getting stronger." And he always did, because with her, falling wasn't failure. It was just part of learning how to rise. Word of the small daily miracles reached the therapists. At first, they were skeptical. They'd seen hope flare and fade too many times. But when they came for their weekly session and saw Leo holding himself upright for nearly 2 minutes, arms out, eyes focused, jaw set with quiet determination, they exchanged glances. One of them quietly adjusted his notes. Another asked Imani if she'd mind sharing what she was doing. She just smiled. "I'm not doing anything special," she said. "I'm just reminding him he's got legs, and they remember how to work if you talk to him nice." Slowly, the professionals began to shift their approach. Instead of focusing only on muscle activation or range of motion, they started incorporating rhythm, music, even storytelling into their sessions. They noticed something important. Leo responded better when he wasn't being treated, but when he was being invited into movement, into trust, into joy. Darius watched all of this unfold from the edges at first, unsure of how to step in without disrupting the fragile magic. But one afternoon he found himself standing in the doorway of the sunroom, watching Imani guide Leo through a slow sway to the sound of a jazz record. Without thinking, he walked in, knelt beside his son, and placed a steadying hand on his back. Leo didn't flinch. He just glanced over, surprised but not startled, and gave a small nod. Darius stayed there, silent, feeling the tremor in his son's muscles, the heat of his effort, the quiet courage it took to keep trying. In that moment, he didn't feel like a CEO or a problem solver. He just felt like a father, present, imperfect, but finally there. From then on, he made space. He moved meetings, skipped conference calls, cleared his schedule for those afternoon hours. Sometimes he'd sit on the floor with them, legs crossed, offering a hand when Leo needed it. Other times he'd just watch, learning how to be still in a way he never had before. He started asking Leo real questions, not about progress or milestones, but about how he was feeling, what he was thinking, what made him laugh that day. The house changed too. It no longer felt like a fortress of perfection. Toys and books began to clutter the coffee table. Mismatched mugs appeared in the cabinets. The marble floors still shone, but now they held the faint scuff marks of wheels and the occasional dropped cookie crumb. It was messier, louder, warmer. It finally felt like a home. Imani never asked for more. She still woke before sunrise to make breakfast, still folded laundry late into the night, still kept her room tidy and her bills paid. But she was no longer just staff. She was the steady heartbeat of the household, the one who knew when Leo needed space and when he needed a hug, who could calm Darius with a single look when he got too intense, who made everyone feel like they belonged exactly as they were. One evening, as they sat around the kitchen table eating leftover stew, Leo looked up and said, "Do you think I'll ever walk all the way to the mailbox?" Imani didn't sugarcoat it. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I do know you'll keep trying. And that's what matters." Darius reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. "And we'll be right there with you," he added, voice rough with emotion. Leo smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real, and in that moment no one cared about how far he could walk. They only cared that he was trying and that he wasn't alone. Weeks turned into months. Leo's balance improved. His posture straightened. He could stand for 3 minutes now, then 4. He started using a walker for short distances, just from the couch to the bookshelf, then to the kitchen door. Each step was small, but each one was his, and through it all, Imani remained. Not as a hero, not as a miracle worker, but as a constant. A woman who showed up every day with kindness, patience, and the quiet belief that every person, no matter their limits, deserves to be seen, heard, and held. The real transformation wasn't in Leo's legs. It was in the way the three of them learned to lean on each other, not out of need, but out of love. And that, more than anything, was the miracle no money could buy. It wasn't a grand event. No cameras, no crowd, no dramatic music swelling in the background. Just a late spring afternoon in the backyard, the kind where the air smells like cut grass and honeysuckle, and the sun slants golden through the trees. A small folding table held paper plates, lemonade in mason jars, and a slightly lopsided chocolate cake baked by Imani's daughter. Her son was there too, fiddling with a drone he'd built from spare parts, while Darius sat on the edge of the patio, sleeves rolled up, looking more relaxed than anyone had seen him in years. Leo sat in his chair near the garden path, watching a butterfly drift between the marigolds. He wasn't thinking about walking. He wasn't thinking about progress or expectations. He was just enjoying the warmth on his face, the sound of easy laughter, the feeling of being exactly where he wanted to be. Then Imani's daughter walked over, holding a piece of paper. "I made this for you," she said, handing it to him with a shy smile. It was a drawing, a robot with mismatched eyes, one arm made of gears, the other holding a walking cane. In the corner she'd written, "For Leo, because even heroes need help sometimes." Leo grinned. "It's awesome," he said. "Way better than anything I could draw," she shrugged. "You're better at other stuff, like standing." Something about the way she said it, not as praise but as simple fact, made him look down at his legs. He'd been standing more lately, longer, stronger, and today felt different, like his body was ready for something new. He turned to Imani, who was wiping her hands on her apron after slicing cake. "Can I try?" he asked. She didn't ask what he meant. She just nodded and walked over, standing a few feet away with her arms out, not to catch him but to welcome him. Leo gripped the arms of his chair and pushed himself up. His legs held. He took a breath, then another, and then, slowly, carefully, he stepped forward, one foot, then the other, then a third. He made it halfway to Imani's daughter before his knee buckled. He dropped to the grass, not hard, just softly like a leaf letting go. But instead of frustration or embarrassment, he laughed, a bright, surprised sound that startled even him. Imani's daughter ran over and offered her hand. He took it, pulled himself up, and stood there, swaying slightly, grinning like he'd just discovered a secret the whole world had missed. No one clapped. No one shouted. They just smiled, the kind of quiet, knowing smiles that come from watching someone you love do something brave. That moment didn't change everything overnight. Leo still used his chair most days. He still had hard mornings, tired muscles, setbacks that made him want to quit. But something had shifted inside him. He no longer saw his body as an enemy. It was his partner, sometimes stubborn, sometimes slow, but always trying. And that was enough. Years passed. Seasons cycled. The backyard gatherings grew a little bigger, a little louder. Imani never moved out. Her room stayed just off the kitchen, though now it was filled with photos of Leo's school plays, report cards, and birthday cards signed, "Love, your second mom." Darius stopped wearing suits on weekends. He learned how to grill without burning everything. He even started volunteering at a local center for kids with disabilities, not because he wanted to fix them, but because he finally understood that support wasn't about solutions. It was about showing up, Leo entered high school with a mix of nerves and excitement. He used a walker in the halls, but no one stared. Not because they didn't notice, but because he carried himself like he belonged. And he did. He joined the robotics club, of course, wrote for the school paper, and once gave a presentation on adaptive design that made his teacher tear up. At graduation, he was asked to give a short speech as one of the student speakers. He stood at the podium, no walker, just his own 2 feet and a quiet steadiness, and looked out at the sea of faces. His eyes found Imani in the 3rd row, sitting between Darius and her own kids. She gave him a small nod. He took a breath and began. "People always ask me what changed," he said, voice calm and clear. "They think it was some new treatment or a miracle cure. But it wasn't. The first time I really stood, wasn't in a clinic or a lab. It was in a sunroom during a rainstorm with the power out. And the only reason I didn't fall was because someone believed I could stay up long enough to try." He paused, glancing at Imani again. "Her name's Imani. She was hired as a housekeeper. But she became so much more. She didn't try to fix me. She just saw me. And she never looked away." He didn't mention money. Didn't talk about struggle in a way that made people feel sorry for him. He just told the truth. Simple, human, real. After the ceremony, a reporter asked if he'd consider sharing his story online, maybe even making videos to inspire others. Leo politely declined. "My story's not about inspiration," he said. "It's about connection. And that doesn't need an audience to matter." Back at the house that evening, now less mansion, more home, they gathered again in the backyard. Same table, same lemonade, same easy silence between words. Leo sat on the grass, legs stretched out, watching fireflies blink on in the dusk. Imani handed him a slice of cake. "Proud of you," she said quietly. He looked up at her. "I wouldn't be here without you." She shook her head. "You were always here, baby. I just helped you remember." Darius sat beside them, silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Thank you for staying." Imani didn't answer right away. She just looked at the two of them. The man who'd learned to love without fixing, the boy who'd learned to hope without guarantees, and smiled. "Some things," she said softly, "are worth staying for." And in that quiet backyard under a sky full of stars, no one needed miracles anymore. They already had what mattered most, each other.